Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for joining us at our Fifth Avenue Synagogue virtual Sunday night programming. As I'm sure we're all aware, that life these days is a little bit, just a little bit stressful. So we thought maybe to do something a little bit different this evening, a little bit more light, a little bit more relaxing, to help, perhaps comfort everyone during these highly unusual, stressful, and peculiar times. So we have a very special program this evening that actually has two components to it, which Rachel will introduce shortly. And it's my hope and prayer that everyone is okay. We do look forward to seeing everyone soon in person in shul as we begin discussions and coordination to open the shul when we're legally allowed to do so on a more grander scale. So we do hope to see everyone in person. But until that time, please do join us for our various virtual programs that we have, literally Sunday through Friday, 6 days a week. And we're doing our best to keep everyone engaged and keeping everyone's spiritual life uplifted, both emotionally and a meaningful level. Now, if I could please give your attention to Rachel, who's going to introduce this evening's program.
Sure. Thank you, Rabbi. And before I begin with the program, I actually just want to thank you for the beautiful sermon that you sent out on Friday. For everyone on the call, please make sure that you have a chance to print out the rabbi's sermons before Shabbat. We send them out on Friday, and they're just very insightful and uplifting, I know, for my family, and I'm sure for yours as well. So to tonight. Tonight, we have the privilege of hearing and watching Part 3, a performance of part 3 of a very special symphony called Clarion Calls, presented by composer and maestro Charles Bornstein. Part 2 of this symphony was actually performed at Carnegie Hall in 1980. So you can see that it's very special that we have our own presentation tonight. The piece that we're about to hear, and of course I'll let Charles speak more about it, but it brings together very uplifting messages from President John F. Kennedy, actually the speech that he would have given in Dallas the day he was assassinated, and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., placed over beautiful music. And the time, of course, calls for some healing and for inspiring and uplifting messages. And so let's go right to the source tonight, since we are so fortunate to have Charles Bornstein with us. Charles, could you tell us just a little bit more about the genesis of this special piece?
Sure. I had just come back from Europe, and I was trying to think of an American theme, because in Europe, American musicians, at that time anyway, were thought of as being not as good as the European musicians. Of course, there was always Leonard Bernstein that was better than everyone in Europe, but they seemed to forget that between 1946 and now. So I wanted to, with everything I had learned in Vienna, write an American work, and it seemed to me the most American thing was John F. Kennedy. Later came Martin Luther King. I had already started it, but the flavor of the years that I was, the formidable years, was from Kennedy. Even though I was 9 and 10 years old, it was still, a major thing to me. It was still a very big force, like Washington or Lincoln or any of those. It's funny that the presidential scholars find President Kennedy, Ronald Reagan, and Abraham Lincoln all of the same mysterious vein, that there's something about them nobody could put their finger on. And those were 3 of the most popular presidents within the last 100 or 125 years, whatever. So it interested me very much, but it was all quite accidental. First of all, I want to thank the rabbi, and I want to thank you, Rachel, that always does such a beautiful job in preparing everything before my revolutionary etudes. I'd like to thank Jacob Gold, president, and Larry Heyman, Ted Mervis. And I'd like to also make a special thanks to Stephen Pearlbinder, who made this all possible from its inception, when it was just an idea to write an American sounding piece. What makes American music sound American, of course, is jazz. If you use jazz, then everybody says, well, it sounds American. Stravinsky used jazz and everybody said, oh, Stravinsky's going American, which he really wasn't. But in any case, the idea was that they were using American sounds from popular music within a symphonic thing. And Bornstein moved that up a notch in West Side Story and some of his others. So I tried to synthesize an American sound with this that would be reflective of the Kennedy and King words, which were, as you said, very uplifting. And it seemed to me that after I began the work, it's actually a miracle to have these two great actors. I was living in the Osborne, the building catty corner from Carnegie Hall. You know, the big brown palace?
Yeah.
And there was a doorman strike, the first time in New York history in 50 or 60 years, they said. And everyone in the building was asked to take an hour. And the guy that came after me was William Lynch, the director who directed the last plays of Tennessee Williams. And volume 5 is also dedicated to William Lynch and his wife, Mary Ellen Flynn, who was an actress. And he said, when he heard the piece, he invited me to his apartment, and I played it for him, and he read the Kennedy and King words. He said, you know, you have to get Bill Devane, William Devane, that played in the Missiles of October, to read the Kennedy words. And I said, well, how do you do that? I just can't call him. He said, well, Mary Ellen is in an off-Broadway play with Susan Sarandon, and Susan Sarandon is involved with another play or movie with William Devane. So we'll ask her if you could call him and explain it to him. And so I heard from him a few weeks later and gave me Devane's number. I called him and he said he would do it. And then I called Paul Winfield's agent in Chicago and explained it to him. And he said, well, it'll take 2 weeks. And, you know, and 2 days later, he called and said, yes, if Bill is going to do it, I'll do it. And that's how it all came together.
It all goes back to the doorman strike.
All to a doorman strike.
Yes,
They invited me to some lovely parties there. I remember there were some extraordinary theatrical people whose names I had known since I was...
Amazing. Amazing. Well, we'll get shortly to the piece, but the rabbi will play it for us, and everyone will be able to watch it on their screen. But before we begin, Charles, would you do us the favor of playing just some short bits? You know, one of the things that you do very masterfully in the piece is portray different tones and times and themes through the music, attitudes even. And maybe you could give some very short examples of that before we go to the screening.
Sure. The whole idea in this third movement, or part 3, is that the speech that Kennedy had written for Dallas was never delivered because he was killed an hour before he was to deliver it. And it's got a very peaceful tone to it. We in this country are by destiny rather than choice the watchmen on the walls of world freedom. We ask, therefore, that we may be worthy of our power and responsibility, that we may exercise in our strength with wisdom and restraint, that we may achieve in our time and for all time the ancient vision of peace on earth, goodwill towards men. That must always be our goal, in the righteousness of our cause must always. So it has this religious quality. And since no one ever heard Kennedy deliver the speech, the first time they hear it now is in this symphony, where a Kennedy imitator or a Kennedy actor does it in a way that is conceivable Kennedy would have done it. So I chose to write some music that had this peaceful quality to it after all of the tumult of the two movements before. And I get that feeling by using the amen cadence, which is very simple. And that simple, those two chords, or three, make up in different keys and is set up in different ways, make up the tone of the movement under Kennedy. It's like an opera without singing. The words are so great, you can imagine that it could have been sung, but it's the big arias of our time were by Martin Luther King and Kennedy and Reagan. And so on. It's hard to play the orchestra, but you get the idea. It's a big sort of bowl of harmony over that theme. I can't hear you.
I'm sorry, Charles. I said that was magnificent. And now that we've given the tease, let's go ahead and show the DVD. Rabbi, would you be able to start the screening?
Yes, sure.
Thanks so much.
I only see myself in a little square on the top. Is that correct? When I speak, do you see me larger?
Yes, yes, we see the full screen. Yeah.
Okay. Not that it's anything glorious, but equality, right? Sure. Can't hear the sound. There's no sound.
We are by destiny rather than choice, the watchmen on the walls.
Can you turn it up?
We ask, therefore, that we may be worthy of our power and responsibility, that we may exercise our strength with wisdom and restraint, and that we may achieve in our time and for all time the ancient vision of peace on earth, goodwill toward men. That must always be our goal, and the righteousness of our cause must always underlie our strength. For as was written long ago, except the Lord keep the city, the watchman waketh in vain. This nation was founded by men of many nations and backgrounds. It was founded on the principle that all men are created equal, that the rights of every man are diminished when the rights of one man are threatened. Today we are committed to a worldwide struggle to promote and protect the rights of all who wish to be free. We must all, in our daily lives, live up to the age-old faith that peace and freedom walk together.
Yes, we're moving to a land of freedom now. I know you're asking unknown stands strong within the shadow, keeping watch above his own. How long? Not long, because the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. How long? Not long, because mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He's trampling out the vintage where the grapes of wrath have soared. He's loosed the faithful lightning of his terrible swift sword. His truth is marching on. He has sounded forth the trumpet that shall never call retreat. He is sifting out the hearts of men before his judgment seat. Oh, be swift, my soul, to answer him. Be jubilant, my feet. Our God is marching on. Glory, hallelujah. Glory, hallelujah. Glory, hallelujah. Glory, hallelujah. His truth is marching on.
All this is not unrelated to world peace. When a man's ways please the Lord, the scriptures tell us, he maketh even his enemies to be at peace with him. And is not peace, in the last analysis, basically a matter of human rights? The right to live out our lives without fear of devastation. The right to breathe air as nature provided. The right of future generations to a healthy existence. Let us resolve to be the masters, not the victims of our history, controlling our own destiny without giving way to blind suspicions and emotions. Let us distinguish between our hopes and our illusions, always hoping for steady progress. For we seek not the worldwide victory of one nation or system, but a worldwide victory of man. The modern globe is too small, its weapons too destructive, they multiply too fast, and its disorders too contagious to permit any kind of victory. The winds of change appear to be blowing more strongly than ever. But for years we have sailed with those winds at our back and with the tides of human freedom in our favor.
So I say to you today, my friends, so even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day Little black boys and little black girls will be able to join hands with little black boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted and every hill and mountain shall be made low. The rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight, and the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. So let freedom reign from the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire. Let freedom reign from the mighty mountains of New York. Let freedom reign from the Highland Alleghanies of Pennsylvania. Let freedom reign from the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado. Let freedom reign from the curvaceous slopes of California. But not only that, let freedom reign from Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom reign from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom reign from every hill and molehill of Mississippi, from every mountainside. Let freedom reign. When this happens, when we allow freedom to ring, we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city. We may be able to speed up the day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual. Free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
In a world of complex and continuing problems, in a world full of frustrations and irritations, America's leadership must be guided by the lights of learning and reason. The United States is a peaceful nation. I speak of peace, therefore, as the necessary rational end of rational men. I realize the pursuit of peace is not as dramatic as the pursuit of war, but we have no more urgent task. And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. My fellow citizens of the world, ask not what America will do for you, but what together we can do for the freedom of man. Finally, whether you are citizens of America or citizens of the world, ask of us here the same high standards of strength and sacrifice which we ask of you. With a good conscience, our only sure reward. With history, the final judge of our deeds. Let us go forth to lead the land we love. Ask his blessing and his help, but knowing that here on earth, God's word must truly be our own.
Thank you, Charles. That was just magnificent, and how special to hear those powerful words paired with that beautiful music. So thank you very much for sharing that with us.
Yeah, thank you all.
Very special. So now, and just so you know, Charles, people are texting in through the program Bravo, and what a treat. So I know that the crowd enjoyed this very much. So we thank you again.
Thank you too, really.
Terrific.